Alright, so I'm going to cover the basics on how to set up the MyTown, which is kind of like Towny. So basically, you would take your server, for example, I'm using the Minecraft from Feed the Beast. I would, create my folder structure as I normally would. Then you would just open up your mods folder, and you would download whichever mods you want to use. Permissions EX is a requirement. It's a dependency of the MyTown. MyTown lib is also another dependency of MyTown. So you need both of these for this one to work. So all you do is you copy them into here, as you normally would. And then you would just run your server as normal. And this is gonna it'll download everything and create the initial configuration files. These are located under MyTown. Once it's created, it'll have a file size here. And so this is the default command file. So basically, here's your global configuration for chat. You can set things so you can have name, color, that type of thing, right? Like, do you want to be able to use it? Set this to 1. What do you want the name to be? Local. What do you want the abbreviation? What color? That type of thing. So that's pretty straightforward. You can disable all chat formatting based on this flag here. It's a Boolean value, so it's either true or false. If you set it to false, MyTown won't format any chat. This is a distance for local chat. It's just an integer. I'm not sure what the maximum is. You'll have to try that out on your own. This is the database section. It's pretty straightforward. This is the database name. This would be the host, so it would be your web server or whatever's hosting your, if it's localhost, you could put localhost. This is the password for the database. This is a username for the database. This is not needed if you're not using SQLite. If you're using MySQL, you would it wouldn't matter. This you would change to MySQL if you're using MySQL. I mean, I don't know what else you can put there, but SQLite or MySQL. This is your general configuration settings. There's not too much here that's, you might want to muck with. These are just the PvP settings. They're pretty self-explanatory. This is how many chunks towns have to be apart from each other. So maybe you want a close town, you could put 1. If you want a town that's far apart, you'd put 50. And this affects all towns on the server. Users can bypass this by doing close claim. Close claim is a town setting in the game that allows you to change whether or not users can claim closer to you. You might want to do that if you have friends and you want them to be beside you. This is part of the multiplier for blocks. This is just how many making something a nation adds. You can also have it per resident as well. So those are the 2 options there. These are other protection settings. Now, if you do not enable these, you will not have any of the custom protections that are built in. By default, these are all the false. So if you do not say make this true, the queries and that fillers and that sort of thing would bypass protection. So ideally, you're going to want to enable all of these if you're just running a normal server. If you have PvP and you want certain things to be allowed, you can allow them. But in my case, I wanted them all enabled, so I would enable them all, set them all to true, and that would enable the protection. Now this is a little more complicated. This is the server permissions. These are the base permissions that the server or that towns on the server will inherit. So if I set a bunch of basic permissions here, every town that's formed on the server by default will inherit those permissions. Same as goes for wild. So say you wanted the wild to not be able to build, you could set that here. Most of these are set in game, but if you have a string or you have a list of them, you could copy them here. I'll show that in my other video where it talks about the server permissions. So that's a quick overview of the config file and what you need. So that's all set up. Here's your database which got all your information in it because I'm using SQLite. Now, the permissions are located in permissions YML. By default, it's a very basic file that's not sorted right. But if you were to look at it in WordPad, see, this is how it looks. So this is your basic structure for permissions EX. It's .yml file, so it has very structured permissions. Your group name will always have 2 spaces, and everything after that will have 4. And then if you wanted to start a new group, you would just have 2 spaces and then the name. I can cover that basically by looking at one of these. Here's my permissions YML for my server. I have multiple groups, different levels, different people, different permissions. Basically, I have anything that's set here is a negative permission, it's called, and it would remove the permission. Now, say here I set the modify world to give everything under that permission node, but above it, I've removed it. So you want to put your negatives ahead of your additions. If you don't, I think they go in order. So if you don't do it in the right order, you won't have the right permissions. Modify world is another mod that's in the thread as well. You may want to look at that if you want to be able to restrict more permissions. This is mostly focused on MyTown. So if you give this permission here, the MyTown cmd bracket bar dot star bracket, that will give all the basic permissions that you would need. So town, creating a new town, setting permissions into town, claiming plots, that sort of thing. In my case, I have plot and spawn permissions disabled. You might want to do that, you might not. You'll have to read up a little more about what each permission is, but here's the basics of what you kind of need. You don't need any of these other ones. If you just want the basics of getting the server up and running, that's pretty much all you need. Really all you need is these 2 commands. That would do it, but that's leaving you pretty wide open. So I have everything else set, keeps it a little nicer. That pretty much covers it. Once you have that all set, you should just be able to start up your server and away you go. You shouldn't have to muck with too much. I'm going to post another video shortly after this one detailing what you need to do in-game to set things up and how users would use it and how their permissions are set up.